change that up at the top, you can. It's not really that big of a deal. But when we have a practice page, it's going to say day 21 on it. Last week, we started graphing linear equations. So if you guys remember, each of our equations last week was in slope-intercept form like this, okay? And what you guys would do is you would plot this number first on which axis? The y-axis, because that plot on the y-axis because that is the y-intercept. Okay, so that was always your starting point. And then from there, you guys used the slope to figure out where all your other points were. Remember, if it was positive, where did we go? What two directions? So up, then right. And if it had been negative, we did, down and right. DR. Okay, so positive slope, we'd go up so many, right so many, put a new dot, and we'd keep doing that until we ran out of room. Negative, we would do the same thing, only down right, and then once we ran out of room for either of these, remember we switched directions, like this one we would have gone down and left, this one we would have gone up and left, so that's only if we ran out of room. Okay, what we're going to do today, we're going to graph inequalities. So essentially, they are still going to be in the same form, but instead of seeing equal signs, you might see less than or equal. You might just see a less than symbol. You might see greater than or greater than an equal. Greater than or equal. Okay? It doesn't change the first point that you plot, and it doesn't change using the slope to find all your other points. Okay, the only thing, there are a couple things that are different. First of all, one of these or two of these two right here, since they have an equal sign with them, we would connect them with a solid line just like we did equations. But for these two, because they don't have equal signs with them, we wouldn't make a solid line. We'd make what I call a dashed line. You might have heard it referred to as a dotted line. And then also, remember with inequalities on a number line, you guys had a shade left or shade right depending on whether it's less than or greater than. Well, on a graph, you have to do the same thing. You either have to shade under the line or above the line based on whether it's less than or greater than. Okay, so down here at the bottom, it says students will be able to graph a linear inequality, which includes the correct line drawn, dotted or solid. So again, dotted, just, I'm going to make little dashes, same thing, or a solid line, and that the correct side is shaded. So they're showing you here are some differences. You might see this solid line like we've done before, or here's an example of like a dash line. Okay, and then we'll talk about how to know where to do the shading on which side of the graph or which side of the line. Okay, go ahead and turn the page. You guys are going to get a lot of information, and then we're going to actually practice some of these. So this is really important. This is kind of like what I was just talking about. If you see the equal sign, just like we did last week, you're still making a solid line. So that should make sense because with equal signs, it can equal it, which means you would connect them with a solid line. Last Wednesday and Thursday. We started it Wednesday, finished it Thursday. You, not on Thursday, you weren't. Thursday we graphed a whole bunch together in class. When you don't see the equal sign, that's when you make it dotted or dashed, okay? So no equal sign, dashed, equal sign, solid. Okay, so right here, what do you guys think about this one? For problem number 1, would I make that a solid line or a dashed line? I would make that one a solid because of the equal sign. Yep. How about number 2? That one would be dotted or dashed. Not exactly sure what that's there for, but just a little. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. All right, go ahead and turn the page. Okay, so now this says choose the inequality symbol for the line shown. So I know on yours it might be a little bit harder to see, but this is a dashed line. So which one of those would it be? The one without the equal sign. These right here. Dashed or dotted because of there not being an equal sign. Okay, now down here at the bottom, we're going to start getting into the shading. Okay, so it says the inequality still has to be in slope-intercept form. Okay, now this symbol right here can change. It can vary because it might be the greater than, it might be greater than or equal, it might be less or less than or equal. Okay, but it's still like, we still want it in slope-intercept form. So if they give it to you in standard form, we're going to have to move some things around just like we did last week. Remember when we would move the x term and then divide everything by the number in front of y? Remember doing that? I know it's been a long weekend, but all right, turn your page. And I did add some things over here in my handwriting before I printed these so you guys could actually see where above the line would be and where below the line would be. So if you have greater than, whether it's greater than or equal, if you think about greater, you think above. Okay, so a lot of people, when they see a line slanting this way, understand that above is up here and below is down here. When it goes the other direction, some people kind of struggle with that. So I did show you an example of either direction just so you guys know. If it slants this way, the above is more to the right and then the below is more to the left of it. Okay, so this should help you when you guys go to do your shading. If it's less than or equal, that's when you go below the line. Are we okay? I mean, so far you guys have just been given information. Good? Okay, take a look at the one down here at the bottom. I'm going to walk through this with you, and then like I said, there are some blank ones that we're going to actually fill out ourselves. No, you're thinking of just finding slope. No. Okay, so this one says graph the line. Hang on. This is what we're graphing. And so what they tell you to do is, because this is in slope-intercept form, we're still going to graph it just like that were an equal sign. Okay, so our starting point, -2. Okay, so you guys can just kind of look over here. They put their first point right here at the -2 on the y-axis. And then if you don't see a number in front of x, what do I put there? You put a 1. And because it's a whole number, we stick like a 1 underneath it, right? Positive slope goes which two directions? Up and right. So they started at this point and they counted up 1, right 1. Now you guys know if you're doing this by hand, you don't stop there, right? You keep going. The only reason you're only seeing 2 points on here is because when the person put it on these notes, it was on a computer. And when you graph it on a computer, as soon as you put that second point on there, it immediately connects them. But since we're doing all this by hand, I would expect you guys to keep going. Up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. And I would just keep going until I ran out of room. And then once I run out of room that way, we're going to go back to the starting point. We'd go down 1, left 1. Okay? So now, last week, you guys immediately put your ruler down and you just drew a line all the way through it, and you didn't even think about it. you really have to stop and think for a second, because if there is no equal sign, we would not make this solid. We would go through and we would just do like dashes in between all the dots. But because there is an equal sign, they made it a solid line. Okay? Everybody still with me? So that is solid because of the equal sign. Now the symbol is greater than. Greater than gets shaded where? Above or below? Above. So if you guys are looking at this line, would this big section over here be above, or would down here be above? Above it, right? So like if I start, it'd be this way, above. Okay, so then just watch for a second. When you guys go to do your shading, you do have to shade the entire section leading up to that line. What you don't want to do is you don't want to cross the line. And in the past, if any of you guys in here, even though I kept telling you, extend your line edge to edge, it is extremely important when you guys are doing inequalities that you do extend your line edge to edge, because that is a boundary line. We have to have a line going all the way across, so that way we can see an above and a below. Does that make sense? Just make sure you guys extend it all the way across. All right, then you guys can go ahead and turn the page. Okay, so we've got one more example up here. It actually is the same slope-intercept form that we just did. The only thing that changed is now they have a different symbol. Okay, so please follow me. We started at -2, and we had already said that the slope was a +1, so that was up 1, right 1. So again, you know, they went through, plotted all these points, and then they went back. They made it a solid line because it has the equal sign. But now, since it is less than, is that being shaded above or below? So it's less than or equal, so that is going to be below the line. So now you guys would shade this bottom section. And again, you want to shade everywhere beneath that line leading up to the line. Are we ready to practice? Yay, we're so excited. Okay, it's okay. So now down here at the bottom, let's talk about this. Is this in slope-intercept form? Yes. What is the starting point? Okay, so look, I know it's not numbered. However, they do show you that this is the x-axis and this is the y. So you just start there at the 0, right, where they cross, and just count up 3. 1, 2, 3. That would be the +3. That's our starting point. Now, if our slope is -1/2, we go down and right. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do is, starting here, I want you to count down 1, right 2 as many times as you can. And don't make a line yet. Down 1, right 2. Now, I'm out of room, so I'm going to go back to my starting point, and instead of down right, we're going where? Up 1, left 2. You should be able to do that twice. Up 1, left 2. Okay? Now again, because we're dealing with inequalities, you guys need to slow down and you need to think about this before you put your ruler down. Did this symbol have an equal sign? Okay, so then it is a dotted or dashed line. That's the kind of line we're going to make. So what I do, put your ruler down anyway, like you're about to connect them, but then just instead of making a solid line, just do this. In between each 2 points, just make little dashes from edge to edge. It's the only difference. Well, and then of course the shading, but that right there is the biggest difference because you have to know when to make it solid versus when to make it dashed. And then this symbol, is that above or below? Well, is it the greater than or the less than symbol? It's greater. So greater would be above. Okay, so look, is it this big section or the smaller section? The smaller one up here. Yeah, I always kind of, like if you struggle with it, I always kind of just try to do this. Can you guys watch? If I were to put my hand right there on that line and I were to raise my hand up, like it would go this way, right? Like if I were to raise up. So if you ever question, like, am I supposed to shade up here or this way? Just do this. Just ask yourself, if I go this way, did I just move my hand up or down? Well, I just moved it down. But if I put it here and I go this way, I just moved it up. Does that make sense? I think it's a little bit harder the more steep the line gets. Like if you have a line like this, where's up? It's over this way, right? It's this way. So again, sometimes I feel like it just helps if you use your arm or your hand to kind of help you figure out which way to shade. But shade the entire section, just don't cross that line. And it doesn't have to be super heavy and dark shading, just as long as when I look at it, I can tell which direction you went. Yes. All right, when you guys are ready, turn the page, please. Now this doesn't really help you guys much. Let me see. I can't even tell where it's shaded, but I'm going to pretend like it was shaded. Color that in for me. Color in that side of the line for me. Ooh, I like that. Call me captain. Just call me the boss. I like that better. Huh? I can't hear you. Oh.
I didn't know that was the last episode.
That is very random, but thank you for sharing. Okay. Okay, so now this one right here, this is multiple choice. So they have given you a picture and they want you to determine which of these inequalities matches what you see. Okay, so here's the good news. They all say 1/3 x plus 2. So clearly, what they're wanting us to look for is which one has the correct symbol to match the line and the shading. So if it's solid, could it possibly be the top one? Okay, so we know the top one is out. The third one's out. Because the third and the top are out because neither one of those have the equal sign, and they need to have an equal sign for it to be solid, right? Okay, so between these two, did they shade above or below? They shaded below. So is it less than or greater than? So it should be this one right here.
I knew it.
So this one, we chose that one because there was a solid line and shaded below. Okay, so then down at the bottom, it says where to shade for undefined or no slope. Well, first of all, undefined slope is what kind of line? Try again. Vertical. If it's undefined, that you'll see a vertical line. And then if there's no, I don't like when they say no slope. It's really zero slope. A slope of 0 is which kind of line? If it's flat, it's horizontal. Okay, so now this is actually really simple, you guys. Just think about this. If you guys had a horizontal line, whether it's solid or dashed, where's above that line? That's easy, right? If you guys have greater than, you would shade up here. This is the above. And if you had less than, this is the below. And again, you'd have to know whether there was an equal sign or not to know whether this was supposed to be solid or dashed. But as far as the shading is super simple for horizontal lines. And then think about vertical lines. If you had a vertical line, which would be this one here, the x being a constant, so this one right here is vertical. If I told you less than, would you shade to the right or to the left? Yeah, so this one would be the less than side, and this one over here would be the greater than. So technically, this is what we would consider the above to the right, and then this would be the below to the left. All right, flip it or turn it over. So now they're just telling you again that if it's x with a constant, these are your vertical lines. And anytime it's vertical, if it's greater than, we're going to the right. If it's less than, we're shading to the left. So it's everything I just got done saying to you, but they have it right here. Then down at the bottom, they've already graphed this one for us. No equal sign, what kind of line? No equal sign means dotted or dashed. Okay, so for the x being -2, this is the only time we plot on which axis? The x-axis, thank you. The only time you plot your first point, this number, on the x is when the inequality starts with the letter x. There's no y involved, okay? So you'll notice they went ahead and put their first point at -2 on the x-axis. And then because it was x being a constant, they knew it was a vertical line. We made it dashed. And then this symbol, greater than, do I shade left or right? I shade to the right. So you guys are going to shade this entire section of the graph without crossing the line like I accidentally did right there. Any questions before we move on? We're still good? These were actually already shaded. You guys just can't tell because when I printed them, the shading didn't really show. All right, so they've got one more as an example, and then we're going to do one down here at the bottom. So again, since this starts with the letter X, the -2 gets plotted on the X-axis. I see an equal sign right there, which means it's solid. Okay, so they made their solid line at the -2. And then because it's less than, do we go left or right? Less than goes left. Less, left. Less, left. How we doing, everybody? Same. All right, let's try this one down here at the bottom. Where do I put my first point? At the +3 on which axis? The X. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3. First point, right there. Am I going to make it solid or dashed? Solid because of the equal sign. Okay, so then you guys can just pick your rulers up. This is the only time you don't have to plot multiple points. You just plot the one. You pick up your ruler. Now we just said it's solid, so when you guys go to draw on that grid line, just make sure, make it solid. And then we need to figure out, am I shading left or right based on that symbol? Shading to the right because that is greater than. So now you just want to start at that line and shade the right part of the graph, the right side of the graph. Color inside the lines. We're going back to coloring, everybody. Like we're 5 years old. Just don't cross those lines. It's a good thing we use pencils, right? Because then you guys can just erase. You know what the most annoying thing is having to erase a solid line and make it dashed. That's kind of a pain. So just make sure that you pay attention before you start connecting your points with what kind of line it's supposed to be. Yes. Okay. So it says to solve inequalities, you use the same methods that we used last week, except if you have to multiply or divide by a negative number, what happens to our inequality symbol? We're not even thinking about that right now. If you multiply or divide by a negative, what happens to the symbol? It flips. You switch the direction of the inequality symbol. Okay, so you guys just need to be careful because when we had just equal signs, when we had equations, we didn't have to worry about, am I going to flip that around? Because if you flip an equal sign, isn't it still an equal sign? But if you flip a less than symbol, it becomes greater than. So you guys have to be careful. Okay, so they walk you through this process. I'm going to show it over here just because I like to see it step by step. Okay, so write this out for me. When it is in standard form, and we have to put it in slope-intercept form, what is always my very first step? Move the x term. We're used to seeing this x term being positive, so you guys are always like, oh, subtract it. Well, now it's negative, so how do I move it? We're going to add 3x to both sides. Make sure you're doing this on your paper, please. Now, is this positive or negative 2y? Okay, make sure you bring down a negative sign with it. Can we combine these two over here? No. Now they're both positives, so when you write it, we typically like the x term first, so 3x plus 12. That's step 1. So now comes the division step. Please listen to me. If this were a positive 2 and we divided by a positive 2, this symbol would stay a less than symbol, okay? But since we are going through and dividing by -2, the rule in math states that if you divide by a negative, this symbol always has to flip around. You should have learned that in pre-algebra, and then it used to also be taught in Algebra 1A, but now that the curriculum is different, they expect you to already know that. Like, that is something that you're supposed to just already know coming into this class. Okay, so cross those out. Y is now by itself. We already flipped around the less than to greater than. The first two numbers make up your slope. It has to be left as a fraction. Okay, now you have one positive and one negative. Wouldn't the whole thing just stay negative? We never write negatives on the bottom, ever. So if you see a positive over a negative, I always just move that negative sign up top. Okay, now can you reduce 3/2? No, 3 and 2 don't have anything in common except for the number 1. So you leave that as a -3/2 x. And then do the division here, because this should give you a whole number answer. It might be positive, it might be negative. What is it? -6. Now we have it in the form that we need it in. I would plot my first point at the -6 on the y-axis, right? We'd start here, and then we'd go down right till we ran out of room. Okay, flip it over. I think we're going to do 4 problems together. We're going to actually go ahead and graph the one that we just solved. We're going to go ahead and graph it, and then there's 3 others we're going to do, and then that'll be the end of your notes. Okay, before we start, please look up here. Is this line going to be solid or dashed? Okay. And then will I shade above or below based on the symbol? Above, because that is greater than. Okay, so these are just things you should keep in mind before you even start plotting your points. Okay, so start at -6 on the y-axis. Remember, if this starts with the letter y, then your first point is on the y. If this starts with an x, it'd be on the x. Okay, now you guys said with negative slopes we go down right. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to count down 3, 1, 2, 3, right 2. I can only fit one more point, so what do I need to do? Go up left, so go back to the -6, count up 3, left 2. You should be able to do that several times. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I would get all the points on there, and then remind yourself, okay, am I making a dashed line or am I making a solid line? We said dashed. So when you put your ruler down, do not make it solid. Just put it down like you were about to make it solid, and then just make dashes in between each 2 points. See, I think it would, on a computer, it's easy to make the dots because they usually give you like a button to use for it to make a dotted line. But if, you know, it would be a pain to have to use your pencil and make dots all the way. That's why I make dashes. And then where's above? Smaller, bigger. The bigger section? Yeah. So then just start shading away. Nothing crazy. How do you guys feel about that? Is it okay? No bueno? Bueno? Cool. That's all I've done today is talk to myself. All right, then down at the bottom, we've got y and we've got a constant. So where do I put that for? Okay. And if there is no x term, what does that mean? It means there's zero slope, which means it's flat, which means it's horizontal. Okay? So now tell me about this. Is that one going to be solid or dashed? Solid because of the equal sign. And will we shade above or below? Huh? Below? Below. Below. Make sure you're graphing this, please. Okay, so we said solid line. And then below, pretty obvious. Down. You'd be surprised how many people mess that up. Well, also, I mean, it makes sense when I just come right out and I say, okay, guys, it's less than, and we are shading below, then that's easy. But if you were sitting there by yourself, would you guys know that that's less than? Because some people struggle knowing the symbol. So if you think that that's greater than, some people might shade up. So you have to know the difference between less than and greater than. And I keep trying to get people to understand, if you were to make the letter L with your fingers, the less than symbol looks more like the letter L. Greater than is backwards. It doesn't look like an L because it's the wrong way. Less than starts with L, so this is less than, and then obviously this way would be greater than. Are we good? Okay, flip it over. Two more. Now this is what I'd like you guys to do. I'm going to freeze the screen for just a second. I would like you guys to take this, write it over here to the side because that's standard form, and I would like you to try to do the process we did before. Move x and divide by the number in front of y. Now once you do that, do not graph it, because we need to make sure you do it correctly before you actually do the graphing part. Okay, so do it on your paper right now. Did you get it? Now I know you guys can't see it, but I'm going to work it out and then we'll compare. But like I said, do not start graphing it until you know for sure that you've gotten the right answer on your paper. So here, I'm going to show you one step. Are you ready? What did you guys do first? So how'd you move it? You subtracted it? Did all of you subtract 3x? Okay, so there's step one, right there. You can all see it up on the screen. Okay? Now, because we typically like the x term to be written first, both of these were negatives, so you would need to make sure you had negative signs in front of the 3x and the 10, okay? Now, what's my second step? Divide by -2, okay? So do it, -2. And since we're dividing by a negative, what happens here? Flip it. And, I mean, obviously, don't forget to bring down the part of the equal sign with it. Okay, what happens when you have two negatives? Turns positive, and does 3/2 reduce? Okay, so we're going to leave that as positive 3/2 x. And then when you do this division, negative divided by negative turns positive. So you've got +5. Okay, good job, nice job. So now before we graph it, let's talk about what it's going to look like. Solid or dashed? Solid because of the equal sign. And is this greater than or less than? It's greater, so is that above or below? Above. Now we have everything we need to plot. Okay, so we've got +5. So make sure you guys put your first point up here at the 5. Now, because our slope is positive, don't we normally go up and right? Do we have room to go up 3? Okay, so since we can't go up and right, we've got to go down and left. So count down 3, left 2, down 3, left 2, down 3, left 2. Should be able to fit 4 points total. And it's solid, so when you put your ruler down, make it solid. You good? Okay. And then I need to know, is the smaller section above or the bigger section? Smaller section. Nice job. One more to go and then we're done with our notes. Okay, what form is this? Point slope form. So let's talk about it because we haven't done one in a while. This number and this number make up our starting point. That's our ordered pair. But what do we have to do to them both? We have to change them to their opposite. So even though that says -5, it is a +5, and that's the x because it's paired up with x. This one over here becomes +4, and it's the y because it's paired up with the y. So there's our starting point. Okay? What is our slope? 2/1. Okay? Now let's talk about all the different things that we have going on here. Positive slope, up and right. And then let's talk about the type of line. Is that going to be solid or dashed? Solid because of the equal sign. She was in my first period. Say Gabriella? Yeah, that was first. Uh-huh. Yeah. You're fine. Okay, and then symbol, is that less than or greater?
Yes.
Less, so is that above or below? Below. Okay, so now we have everything we need. Now look, listen to me, please. As soon as we start doing slope over and over and over again, We always do up or down first, then left or right second. But when we plot points, it's x first. So you go to the 5 on the x, and then you go up 4. So you got to keep, and I just told my first period this today, the same thing, because they're plotting points, and then tomorrow they're doing slope. This is left or right, then up or down, and then this is the opposite. So you've got to know when to do what, because you don't want to mess that up. So now we're going to go up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1. Well, you better make more points than that. That's not enough points. Okay, so you already did that. You're ahead of me. Okay, so then go back here and then go down to left 1. So we can fit lots of points on this one. Yeah, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 total points. Then make it solid. Okay, look up, look up, look up. Is the bigger section or the smaller section the section I shade? The smaller one, that's the below. Nice job, guys. And that is officially the end of your notes. And then now you're going to be able to practice some on your own.